That's how governments often use planning to try and influence behaviour, influence the market.
And there's times we scratch our heads and go, oh, no, are you actually going to make some money out of this?
This could stop you pretty much building anything.
There's a lot of good things in planning, there's a lot of challenges in planning. We've got a housing crisis just now, which arguably is largely affected by planning. This might be quite a revolutionary podcast, hopefully, for the listeners and the viewers. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Talks podcast. My name's Kenneth Martin, I'm your host, and I am joined today by Scott MacKay from MacKay Planning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Great. Scott, we've known each other for probably far too long, and Block Architects, MacKay Planning have worked with each other for a couple of decades, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, always with success, I should say, if ever clients are listening.
I think we have. We got there in the end, always.
That's it. One of the interesting challenges that's always been brought to the fore with the podcast is the issue of planning. And there's a lot of good things in planning, there's a lot of challenges in planning. We've got a housing crisis just now, which arguably is largely affected by planning. So I think this might be quite a revolutionary podcast, hopefully, for the listeners and the viewers. But before we get to that, maybe do a wee introduction to yourself, how you get involved in the industry, and we'll move forward from there.
Yeah, so Scott MacKay, and my consultancy is MacKay Planning, which I've been doing that now for 18 years, which is incredible to think it's that long. But started off as a planner. I studied planning at Strathclyde University in Glasgow. And I got a job with East Kilbride District Council just before reorganisation. So I worked in East Kilbride as a planning officer, and then that became part of South Lanarkshire at reorganisation. Got my qualification and met a young lady who became my wife, and she lived in Sheffield, which wasn't very convenient.
All right.
So I ended up...
How rude of her.
And I ended up moving down to England, got a job in Manchester working for Turley's, which at the time were probably one of the biggest planning consultancies in the UK. Worked there for a few years. Got a job in Leeds because it was a wee bit closer with a company called DPP. We were doing, Turley's, we were doing a lot of supermarkets, Sainsbury's. This was the time, sort of like late 90s, early 2000s, where all the big supermarkets were really expanding. So it's a lot of retail stuff and housing as well, but particularly got involved in a lot of retail. Tesco with DPP in Leeds. Tesco's all over the north of England. And then I got asked to come back to Glasgow by DPP and run a Glasgow office. So I got promoted, ran the Glasgow office, built that up, and then eventually went on my own. And Tesco gave me the backing to come with me. So that gave me the confidence to set up my own consultancy.
Right.
And now it's very diverse, all sorts of different work, housing, retail, heritage, a lot of heritage stuff, country, estates, working with a paddle company who are tennis, paddle tennis, expanding.
The new craze.
Yep, lots of that. Drive-throughs, local convenience stores, changes of use, all sorts of variety of different planning things, which is good because it's varied, it's enjoyable, and it's not just looking at one sort of area of planning. Applying my kind of diplomacy and knowledge to various different challenges for my clients. And
I think that's important as well, particularly for the kind of smaller businesses, is that diversity, because you could go to the bigger practices, and end up getting pigeonholed into a certain area or sector. And for some people that's great, but I think for a lot of people who maybe got an entrepreneurial kind of arm to their psyche, that they want to try and get something a bit diverse, and no day's the same.
Yeah. From a business sustainability point of view, the diversity is very important. I've been there in the past where a client got a really good relationship with a client, so much so that they just kept giving me more and more work. They wanted me to, they got me to the stage I was doing sites for them all over the UK, doing all their planning work. And this was a large blue chip company. And when they started to slow down, you slow down with it. So I learned from that really important to keep that diversity and lots of different clients, lots of different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
Because one business can be busy one day, and then they can their board can just make a decision that stops their development program overnight, and that can affect you. And also different sectors. The industry's moving at different speeds, and different parts of it will change overnight. Policy can change things, the economy can change things. So having a diverse portfolio of clients and sectors is good for business sustainability.
Yeah. I want to take you back to something you said there. You mentioned you went to Glasgow to do your degree in planning.
Strathclyde University in Glasgow, yeah.
So one of the things the podcast has discovered is that the local authority planning departments and private sector are struggling to find new upcoming planning consultants. So what made you so interested in planning when you were a wee bit younger? Well,
it was actually, to some extent, it was my mum. My mum worked at Glasgow University in the department that was giving out grants. So it was a kind of admin job that she had, but she was through that, she kind of got quite a lot of information about different career opportunities and different courses. And I was at that stage at school where I didn't know what to do. So through my mum and through a careers advisor at school, I was kind of assessment was that my choices, they tried to steer me down, was civil engineering, architecture and planning. I wanted to get into working. Mm-hmm. University to me was just the means to get to the job that I wanted. I wasn't really going to university. I didn't really plan to go to university to enjoy university, which I did, but that wasn't my thinking at the time. I wanted to get out and working.
Yeah.
So I was quite young as well when I went to, because I was 17 when I left school and went to uni. So I was quite young and maybe naive and just wanted to work. And I worked part-time all the way through university as well. The days when young people could get a part-time job, which is very difficult nowadays.
Apparently so, yeah. Apparently so.
So that was good. That was a good time, and I was very fortunate to get a job relatively quickly after uni, because that was a difficult time in the early 90s with the economy in recession, and with local government reorganisation meant that there was very few planning jobs around. Mm-hmm. And I did some voluntary work for an architect who was doing a facelift project in Lanark for the council. Right, and I worked my summer voluntarily for them just to get some experience, and through that made connections with the council. And then when a job came up, I had already got that experience, and my name was known that I had a good chance, and I got a job, the first job I applied for. Good.
It's quite often the case. That's happened to me as well with the local authority, and 20 odd years later we're doing work for that same local authority. We ticked a lot of boxes elsewhere, but in part it's they know the face, So yeah. So planning in Scotland. Mm-hmm. That's 25 years or so I've been involved in architecture and construction in Scotland. And I've seen too many changes. I've seen a lot of increased regulation. And I keep saying it's arguably for the right reason, but the unintended consequences are things that tend to, as architects, drag us down. So I think a lot of listeners will be really interested in your view on the planning system, and maybe a wee kind of recap on what you've seen over your career and where we're at now.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's over 30 years working as a planner now, and can't believe that. But yes, seen changes.
Doesn't it show?
And one of the key things, I suppose, being in Scotland is that we have the planning system is under a different legal framework from what it is in England. So there's different procedures and there's different policies, which is interesting because if you go as a planner in Scotland, and development comes forward from obviously local businesses, but also UK national businesses as well who are looking to develop in Scotland. And for them, that can be challenging because if they've done work in England, then they're coming up against a subtly different planning system in Scotland. So being a planning consultant in Scotland, that really helps because they need somebody who on the ground who understands the difference. Often UK developers initially might use somebody based in London who doesn't know that, doesn't know it's slightly different. But so it's quite often the case we'll get recommended because it's more on the ground. So changes that have happened fundamentally, it's just the nature of a bureaucracy, in a sense that over time it just becomes more and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the early days, I remember we had resource-wise, worked in the council. I remember there was 7 people doing the job of probably what is done by about 2 people now in that same department. So you've got a massive resource difference now, I think, to what it was like 30 years ago in local authorities.
Yeah.
And that resource is not just less people, which has a big impact, but it's also less experience. Because you would back then, I remember there was people I worked with who'd been there for a long time, had a lot of experience and could, you could learn a lot from. And you worked in an office close together, all open plan office.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you've got a lot of those experienced people have gone. They've been offered packages to go over the years at various stages. These packages get offered and a lot of them go. So that experience is lost. And you've got, since COVID, obviously, you've got a lot of people working from home or still in local authorities. So they are, the younger ones coming through aren't sat next to somebody with lots of experience. It must be difficult for them to, I can't imagine what it really must be like, but it must be difficult for them to gain experience very easily or quickly. When they're kind of on their own a lot. And so I do think all of that over the last sort of 5 years since the pandemic has had an impact on the efficiency of the planning system that the Scottish Government are genuinely trying to address, trying to work their way through and find solutions for. But a lot of it comes down to resourcing. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen over the last few years planning fees increase every year, whereas they didn't used to. It's only the last few years they've been increasing every year.
Yeah.
The planning fees stayed static for about a decade, and then now every year they go up every year.
Yeah, they've just went up. According to this at the start of April,
that's
they've
right.
just gone up. Yeah. So I want to take you back to something you said there about the younger planners not having the resources. I kind of think an observation for me might be that the planners nowadays, I'm going to take away the planners. The planning system nowadays, would probably dictate that there's a tick box exercise as opposed to an ability to. I recollect an ability to think outside the box a wee bit and understand whether or not a proposal was within the spirit, if you like, of the planning regulations. But now it seems to be the tick box. You can put an application in. You've got 95% of all the boxes ticked. You've not got the one ticked for the newts or whatever it is. I'm not decrying animals or newts, but because you've not ticked that last box, it's a refusal. And it's something I feel is a bit frustrating. And then maybe is that ability to think, around those things, has that been taken away, or is it just my perception?
No, I think it's right. And I don't think it's been taken away. No, the system hasn't taken that away. The system is still the same. The planning decisions are made on the basis of what's called the planning balance.
Right.
So the planning officer does, the nature of their role, they do have a lot of power to make a judgment on planning balance. And that to some extent is subjective. However, the nature of policy and the complexity of it compared to what it used to be and how complex it is now, and the fact that we have a national planning policy, NPF4, which is part of the development plan now, which it didn't used to be. National policy used to be a material consideration. It used to be a factor, but now it is part of the development plan. So local policy and national policy, the planning applications have to be determined in line with that unless there are material considerations to suggest otherwise. That to some extent has shifted that judgment and made it slightly harder for the individual planning officer to make their own judgment. It's taken it away from them to an extent. But I would suggest that it's still very much in the planner's power to make a decision based on their judgment. And so it should be. That's what a planning officer should be. They shouldn't, I don't think, I didn't go to university and work for a local authority and then become a planning consultant just to be a bureaucrat and tick boxes. You want to apply your own judgment, your experience. I got involved in planning because I want to see good development. I want to see development happen. I want to see new buildings constructed. I want to see, old buildings reused. I want to see jobs created. I want to see people living in homes. It's not about bureaucracy for me.
Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, it's part of the nature of bureaucracy that it kind of grows and grows and becomes more complex over time.
I think there's probably a lot of the professionals in the industry are desperate to see development happen, construction happen to get these buildings that are existing back into use or new sites, etc. But there just seems to be so many bottlenecks, I think, now, and a building control system as well, planning, building control, and other statutory authorities to allow that to happen. The NPF4 came in. I'm quite interested, not to debate it, but have this conversation. NPF4 came in, which is the National Planning Policy Framework, and every time I've kind of read it or thought about it, I've got this. It's kind of quite wide open in some respects, I think, for interpretation. To the extent that we typically didn't get a lot of refusals in the past, but we've had some recently. And in my opinion, looking at the officer's report, that was their interpretation of that, and they've went to one side as opposed to the other side. Yeah. For example, it was heavily weighted on reuse of existing buildings. So this was a building that I thought, well, there's not much else we can do with this other than knock it down. If we get this use through, it'll be fine. And then it was refused on reasons that just thought, wow, how big is the housing emergency when we can't repurpose this building? So I don't know if you've had any similar experiences of NPF4. What I try to do is try and gauge that feeling from, obviously a professional planner as to some of the issues that our clients, your clients might face,
Yeah, NPF4 is a problem. The way it's been worded, there's an element of it, it's quite ideologically driven. And to some extent, planning always has been a tool for social engineering. That's how governments often use planning to try and influence behaviour, influence the market. But particularly NPF4 went a step further than previous national planning frameworks. The first two policies are all about climate change, and that is the most important thing that is in driving planning policy now. And there's various things then which flow from that. So if you are ideologically driven in that way, if you're a planning officer that you're thinking that way, you can interpret it right off the bat, NPF4, as being very anti-development. But again, it's worded in such a way that you could read it that way. You could read it that way. You can look at NPF4 and this could stop you pretty much building anything now. You could apply it in a negative way, but the way it's worded is kind of open as well. So if you don't take that view, if you're pro-development, you could look at the same sentence and say, well, it actually supports what we're trying to do. So, and there's a lot of developments now that I'm involved in where, there are elements of that are supportive of the climate change agenda, but somebody who's got a different ideological view could say the opposite. So, for example, there's a lot of controversy around drive-throughs.
Yeah. And
there's an element where you could say, yeah, just ban them completely because they're bad for the environment. But then are they? Are they? You get into the detail of how these things actually work, and EV charging, electric vehicles, cars that are already on the network is it generating new trips? All of this, and should it be bad to have it on a bypass on the outskirts of a town, or is it better to have it in the town? And all of these different pros and cons about, and that's just one example of one type of development. You can apply all of that sorts of issues to all sorts of different types of use. So it is very much open to interpretation, but I think that interpretation is down to ideological reasons. So if you're an anti-development planner, you can very much use NPF4 to refuse anything. Yeah.
But I guess that's the thing. We shouldn't really have anti-development planners in the local authority, should we? Not really.
You shouldn't really, but there are planning officers, just the default position is no. Prove me wrong. That often is the case. Yeah, you've got to work hard to prove them wrong and give them a reason to change their mind. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's worthy of chatting about is potentially so we've talked about local policy and national policy, but then as someone we're involved obviously in putting plan applications in, as are yourselves, is the whole thing of trying to understand from local authority to local authority what those differences may be, because the devil is in the detail. Largely policies can be the same in England and Scotland. We deal with building control projects in England, but we tend to favour Scotland because we understand that better. Where I'm going with that is that we've got some fellow architects and practices that I know, some friends, colleagues, contemporaries, who are now telling us that some of their former developers are, for example, and this has happened to us, they're switching architects to see if a different architect can have a different sway with a different local authority, or the developers are turning and saying, we're just not going to develop in that local authority anymore. So we're moving from one geographical area to the next, in the hope that something might be different, i.e. easier to get that development through. I don't know if you've found anything like that. Or
yeah, I do think that going back, sort of back in the day, there was much more of a over time of relationships between architects and the local authority, where you could say, oh, use that architect because it's in that area, because they know the planning officers, they know what they're looking for. That still exists, but I would say it's definitely less than it used to be. And I think some of that is down to the local authorities, particularly since the COVID pandemic, and them controlling access to the planning officers. So in the past, I think every local authority you deal with, you could get a phone number for the actual planning officer, their desk. You could phone the planning officer at their desk.
Yeah.
You knew who to speak to, and you'd just pick up the phone to them. It's very difficult to do that now. There's some authorities in Scotland that still is possible, but I would say they're in the minority now. And in fact, some planning authorities, you can't actually speak to a planning officer at all. If you do try and phone, you go through a call centre where they will ask you who you want to speak to, and you have to book into that officer's diary for them to decide whether they call you back or not. And they don't always call you back.
Yeah.
Which is very frustrating, because sometimes it could be something relatively straightforward that just a quick phone call can unlock and resolve. And you not getting access to speak to somebody can be a problem. And then you're told to just email them, and you get that automatic response back says, "Oh, we will respond to you within 10 working days," or something like that. And it's like, come on, this is a relatively simple thing we could just sort out in like 10 seconds over the phone, and that all of that feeds into the delays in the system. Whereas
so. But that I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, and I think that, I remember, years and years ago putting applications in, and it was maybe 4 or 5 emails, a couple of phone calls, and it's fairly significant applications, and within 2 months, your approval, or not, typically an approval for us, but it would be through and done and dusted, because you could pick up the phone and you could have that dialogue. And there seems to be a culture now that's not the way things are done. And I find that particularly odd and harsh, bearing in mind that the planning process and the regulatory issues associated with it, the reports, the dancing we've got to do with various other consultants to pull those reports together, is so complex now that the planning department should really be seen as part of the design team. They should be part of that consultation process. Whereas it seems to be more of, put your application in, we'll come back to you if you need more information. Other than that, we'll give you a decision, That
is definitely the way things have gone. There are some signs that it's changing. There's one or two.
I want to talk about them then, because I've not seen them, but go for it.
Well, there's one or two authorities now that I've seen recently who are really struggling. Who appointment of a new head of planning has brought a completely different personality, and we are now going back to them sitting round the table with you at a pre-application stage or at the beginning of the application, and even during an application, actually. Going into their office and having meetings and talking about the application, and that's really refreshing, because that's gone back to what it used to be like.
Yeah.
So I've seen that there's some positive signs that's beginning to happen again. I think that's good. Some of that I think is driven from the local authorities' interest in the planning, heads of planning interest, is trying to influence good design. So rather than a very cold transactional relationship, like you say, where you just put in your application and then you wait, and then you're told if there's something else you need to submit, and then it's just a decision and without any relationship. Actually sitting down and the planning officer saying, well, okay, you've we've got the ability to require developer contributions from you for education or transport or something else, town centre, regeneration or something. But maybe us just taking that money off you and then it going, whatever happens with that money, there's always a question mark over. Rather than that, maybe we could actually get you to put the money into improving the quality of the development itself. And that's quite refreshing and very positive to see that sort of conversation. And that, again, bringing back into the planning officer's judgment and planning balance to say, actually, we would like to see our local authority, our town, being known for really good quality housing developments that people want to live here and it's a pleasant place to live. Rather than just thinking, we can screw this developer for £1 million and that will go into the council's pot and will it actually create new child places in the school? Who knows? It's a good point, actually. I never knew that was coming back in. But I think with project viability today and the climate we're in today, it's putting a lot of projects off. Yes.
They're just not financially viable. So if there's any negotiation then on the developer contributions and the developer can say, well, instead of paying you £1 million, I can afford 500,000, but I will spend that within development and we'll agree how we're going to spend that, then that ultimately does lead to what the council are looking for, which is better environments, I seen a post today. It was in South Lanarkshire, it was in Hamilton, and it was a picture of a civic square with loads of trees and beautiful plants and people having coffees, and I thought, that's all good and well, but it rains in Scotland and the local authority don't have the money for the upkeep of all of those plants and trees and stuff. And I think as an architect, we've seen it, we used to do it years ago, didn't we, when it was the whole sustainability thing, if you wanted to get a development through in the countryside, you'd put a couple of solar panels on top of the roof and say, it's sustainably friendly. And back then that wasn't, but nowadays it's kind of mandatory, so you don't get away with it. But I think it does frustrate me now when I see a lot of local authorities, maybe even all of them, asking for these developer contributions because they're going to do upgrades to, parks and what have you. And then it doesn't happen. They can't afford it. So that swing back to keep the developer, give the developer control. Because I'd like to think if I was going to buy a new house somewhere, in an estate with 200 or 300 houses, that I'm getting as much out of the developer as I possibly could in terms of the environment I'm working in. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think it has gone maybe too far down the route of being quite formulaic. So even, the developer contributions thing, you have supplementary guidance that local authorities bring out requiring developer contributions. And then you have formulas to calculate what that amount is per house. And so it's become, as I say, very formulaic, procedurally. It's just about a procedure. Whereas I like the idea of taking it back into the planning judgment. Again, that's why I'm a planner, and that's why I think most planning officers went into planning. They want to play a part in creating development, good development. And so by it being a tick box exercise and formulaic, it takes away that contribution you as a professional can make to the process. So I do think that I'm seeing signs, as I say, that there's beginning to be a shift away from that formulaic side of things and seeing that there are other ways of creating quality and development rather than just trying to a formula telling you a certain amount of money per plot is required. And at the end of the day, that just goes on to the price of the house. So it's not really affecting the developer. The developer just adds it to their bottom line. It's the person buying the house that it really affects at the end of the day, and it just increases housing costs, which doesn't contribute to dealing with the housing emergency. No, it doesn't. And we've had Eddie from Invertay Homes on one of the first podcasts we did, and he brought that point up as well. Is that when £25,000 a house, £30,000 a plot, so to speak, of developer contributions, that's going to someone's mortgage. And when you add that up over the 20 to 25 years to pay the mortgage off, that's an awful lot of money, It's going back into the system. And I think a lot of homeowners probably don't realise that what they're funding through their mortgage is all these contributions, these kind of hidden taxes, That's the way I see them. They are hidden taxes.
Hidden taxes, definitely. You've mentioned that you're starting to see maybe a few glints or of hopes of the system becoming a little bit easier. Do you want to maybe expand on that and tell us a few other examples?
Well, I think that the Scottish Government are trying to look at ways of kind of unlocking the planning system, partly because of the housing emergency drive to try and find solutions to that, but also just constant criticism from the industry that planning system's too slow. So they brought out, there was a consultation just the end of last year, sort of finished in October, on permitted development rights, and one of them was potentially quite radical. I've not had the time to look at all the responses to that yet, but they are online. You can look at the consultation responses, but partly they were looking at expanding the opportunities for housing to be certain types of housing being able to develop it without needing planning permission.
I think it was in the countryside, yeah.
That's right, yeah. And so it'll be interesting. So the Scottish Government are looking at ways, and that is potentially quite radical.
Do you think, though, that these consultations and looking at ways is something they need to stop doing and just make some hard-nosed decisions and get on with it? I mean, I think about this all the time. I think about the number of reports that we have to do. And it's not just to do the reports. We're doing projects just now with 10 reports, and then back and forward with planning consultants, back and forward to the specialist that's written reports, tweak that, change that, goes back to the local authority. Don't necessarily know if I agree that paragraph might. So it's back and forward with all these reports, and I keep thinking if government really wants housing or any development to happen much quicker, somebody somewhere, and this is my opinion, and correct, I'll get your opinion on it, is they need to sit and look at all of these policies, and maybe even for a temporary period, just say, for the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is, we're not going to ask for that. We're not going to ask for that because we need to speed this thing up. Because what, in my opinion, we don't need is another consultation or another, I can't remember the name of it, but there's this housing advisory board happening in 2027, 2028. You go, it's too late, guys. No, it's far too late. So I think it would require a very brave politician to put their head above the sand or their head above the wall and just say, for a period of time to get the industry moving again, we're going to look at simplifying but radically cutting the planning processes and what have you. But I'll get your opinion on it.
At national level, at Scottish Government level, I suppose part of the problem is because it's because of the nature of the politics of the mix of the Scottish Government. It's not easy to do that. Even though the SNP have been the majority for quite a while now, and they still don't have. They're quite a broad. They're covering quite a broad politics and trying to keep everybody happy, I suppose, are they? Without getting into the politics of it too much, but I suppose that so they're covering themselves all the time and trying to bring consensus.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of consultations, and it's frustrating from the industry's point of view. But I think it's the nature of the politics that they're trying to bring everyone along with them. So they've got to find out what everybody thinks rather than having to be able to take radical decisions themselves. And maybe if we had a slightly different political system, if it was like the Scottish Government was, instead of it being a proportional representation, maybe if it was first past the post, that might mean you might get a much stronger government in power that has the ability to make much harder decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in politics and government and governance.
This isn't a political show either, but it's just that thing of you look at it all and you think, every political party just now is an understanding that there's issues with housing, and I argue that goes beyond housing. Housing is just one part of the construction industry. Look at the high streets, you look at the repurposing of existing buildings post-COVID, etc. And it's actually a bloody disaster, So in my mind, politicians, somebody needs to put their head above the parapet. Stop dancing about trying to please everybody, It's almost somebody needs to become a Trump and just get in there and make the decision and do it. Yeah, there's going to be consequences, and there's going to be people who don't agree with what you've done, but ultimately that would help speed up the housing crisis,
It would,
And then we get, I'm going to say it again, I've said it in the past, we get these swallow boxes appearing, You think surely there's better ways to bring swallow boxes into the local, what's the word? No infrastructure, but into the
urban areas.
Without having to enforce planners and architects to make sure that developers that you've got a swallow box.
It feels like that's one of these examples of planning being used as an easy fix to a bigger problem that maybe it's not actually the right solution.
Yeah.
I struggle with it sometimes. You get asked, you're doing a Starbucks coffee shop, drive-through coffee shop in a suburban area, and you're asked to put swallow boxes, and so your architect puts a few of them on, and then the planner comes back, no, I want 6, right? And you think, right, so you want 6 swallow boxes across the front elevation of this, where people are going in and out to get a coffee. Is that really the best place to be encouraging a habitat for swifts to live? Is it? Isn't it? Is there not better places that maybe you could do it? And it's kind of just, it's putting the problem onto somebody else rather than actually maybe what the government should be doing is putting some money towards giving boxes to the people who will put them in the right places.
That's right. That's what I think should exactly happen. Royal Society of Protection of Birds. Yeah. Give them 100,000 of these things and they can email out their email list, and those who can find proper locations for them can then put them up, for free. Yeah. Come and collect them and put them up. Definitely. I mean, I don't know enough. I think people think because you're an architect and you've dealt with a couple of reports on birds, all of a sudden I know about birds, and I don't, But what I have found out with some of my own developments is these animals tend to go towards environments where they feel safe, where they want to nest. So I don't know that necessarily putting a couple of bird boxes up randomly will attract the result. No, and it causes other problems, as many of our seaside towns suffer from seagulls, and the problem, the mess, and the problems that they cause in towns can never be understated. Really, it's a real headache for local authorities and property owners and shop owners, and so it's not always the right thing to encourage birds to use the high street as their habitat, Stop stealing my fish and chips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've seen the videos of seagulls walking into Greg's. And
they're hilarious, aren't they? They're hilarious. We've chatted kind of a lot of general stuff there. The premise of Hard Talks podcast is to get to the one nitty gritty thing, that either frustrates you, or if you had a chance to fix it tomorrow, that would be the one thing you would do. So I don't know if you've had a chance to think about that, but I'm trying to tease from you. How would you fix it? What's the one thing you would do to try and make your job easier every day?
That is really difficult. Yeah. There is no easy answer to that, because it's the nature of what I do in planning now is it's so varied and complex, is that's just the nature of it. So I don't think you can really get away from that. I think that what I do miss, and we've touched on it already, I do miss is the sort of relationship side of it, both in terms of being able to pick up the phone to local authority planning officers, and have meetings with them and sit face to face and talk about, get a drawing out in front of you and talk about it. I think that's something that I miss from the early days of my career that we've definitely moved away from. But there are some signs, hopefully, that's beginning to come back, but not just between the local authority side and the private sector, but I think also within the industry generally, about different professions working together and having good relationships. So, as a planning consultant, I'm usually, as you are, as an architect, you're part of a team of different professionals. So there will be a solicitor on the team, there'll be an engineer, there'll be a transport planner, there'll be an ecologist, maybe, and there might be a drainage and engineer, and I enjoyed those teams. I remember the days when we were working with Tesco. We had these big teams on big developments that you all got to know each other. In fact, we still meet every Christmas, for a drink, and reminisce about the good old days when we were a whole string of projects and we were working together all the time. People, different companies, you weren't working for the same company. You were different consultancy firms, different sectors of the industry, but you had a common goal and you respected that person's skills and professional expertise, and you worked to get the best out of each other to get the result that you were all working towards. That still exists, but I think, working from home and the sort of lack of sitting around a table has meant that that's less. A lot of these meetings you're doing it online now, which it works and it has its place, but there's definitely been a loss of that kind of ongoing working relationship with people. There's people, you'll be the same. There's people that you work with on projects, you never actually met them in person. It's weird, isn't it?
It's interesting. We see that sometimes in the architects out with planning. We see it a lot with the consultants, whereby in years gone by, we'd actually sit in meetings, design stuff around the table, have maybe fortnightly design team meetings and check this and check that. Nowadays, what we get is we get drawings sent through by email with like, here's the latest drawings. You go, well, what have you changed? What's moved? What am I playing? Spot the difference.
Yes.
And that is really something that's
I get that a lot
bad thing in industry.
It is, yes.
If you're going to do it, and I try and train my guys, and I've seen some of the younger ones in the team not doing this, and it frustrates me, and I do pull them on it, say, look, this is what we need to stop doing. When you send an email to a client with a fresh set of drawings, put a vision cloud around about it, and make sure you put a wee note, in the email saying, here's what I've changed, this is why I've done it. Do you agree, not agree, can change it, whatever,
That's a really good point. I would, in my role in the process, I would very much appreciate that, because the number of times I get sent through drawings, and it is that, because I'm spending a lot of time trying to getting the previous drawings out and trying to work out what have they changed and why have they done that, and just a simple explanation for what the changes are made and why would really help.
Well, our generation's used to doing that. I think that some of the generations coming through, it's not something they're being taught. Or I don't know if it starts at school. I don't know why they don't do it. I see it in my kids as well. Some of the communications, it's like, give me a wee bit more, and then I'll know exactly what you're talking about. You mentioned earlier about the various different consultants, etc., and we've been speaking about the challenges of taking projects through planning. I want to try and spend a wee bit of time thinking about the client relationship. So we've got clients that come through to us. Some are, I wouldn't say they're experienced, but they've maybe done a couple of projects in the past. Some have done no projects, And then it's almost like we've got to educate them again on this whole journey they're going to go through, particularly at the start of the planning process. So how do you position that with your clients in terms of breaking the news to them? They've got these various reports to do, and that we're not going to be able to speak to the planners the way they think we're going to be able to speak to them,
Yeah, that is actually a really interesting sort of development factor in all of this. Is that I would agree. I would that there's a lot of clients nowadays I have are quite inexperienced and don't really understand what the system's like. Whereas in the past, when you worked for some of the bigger companies who had their development executive or whoever it was your point of contact with that company, that client. They knew the development industry. They were probably a trained surveyor or an architect, and they knew how the system worked. So it was much more efficient. Nowadays, I'm working with a lot of clients that they really don't know what they're getting themselves into. And so there is an element of educating them and breaking the bad news to them. That just because you think your development's a good idea, you think it's great, the planners will love this. Sorry, it's not that simple. No. You've got a lot of regulation to get through to get to that point where they can actually say that they support it. So my approach to that is that I always ask new clients and even existing clients, they get it. It's long-term clients. They appreciate the sort of planning appraisal stage. So it benefits everybody. So generally the first thing I'll do is if they put a site to me, I'll say, well, let me do an appraisal. In a week or so, I can turn around a report, which gives me chance to do some time to do some research, make sure I've got all the correct policies that are relevant to it, looked at the site, looked at what's round about it, looked at planning history, looked at other consents that are being granted or things refused in the vicinity, to give them a picture of what the chances are of their proposal getting through and a strategy to take it there, to get it there, so it can set it right. This is what we need to do to take this forward. And so it benefits me because it means I've got that baseline of information and I can then give them informed advice. And also it benefits the client because they've got a bit of paper. They can say, right, this is what Scott says. This is what we can do to take this forward. And they understand the process and what's going to be required to to take it forward. They can then look at budgeting for that and timescales, and make a judgment about whether they've got other sites. I think, well, that site's a bit riskier than that one, so I'll maybe not go that direction. I'll go this other direction. Yeah. So it helps them make informed decisions as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important actually, because there's two. We see it. I guess we kind of get caught with the tail between the legs at times, because the clients maybe made the decision, they've bought the site, particularly maybe they're kind of less experienced, they've bought the site or they've bought the building and they're committed, and they've got to keep going, and there's times we scratch our heads and go, are you actually going to make some money out of this? Now we don't write business plans as architects, and we're not cost consultants either. I think a lot of clients think that because we're architects, that we know everything about everything, and we know a bit about everything, but we're not special. We don't specialise in anything other than architecture and design. So what we tend to do with our clients is we'll on our fee proposal, after we've had those conversations, we'll put tick boxes in for you'll probably need this report and that report and this report, just to make sure that at least in black and white something's gelled with the client that you're going to have to consider the cost for these reports, But I agree with you that the feasibility stage, that exercise, doing that work is probably or definitely a key factor that most clients should be doing. It just saves disasters down the line.
Yeah, I think it's very valuable time and money spent at that at the early stage.
Yeah. And actually the other thing is, we've been in a position before where we clients are committed and then they start spending the money on all these reports, and then there's the one report at the end where they go, I'm not spending any more money. I've done what I've spent, it goes into planning. And of course it's that one report that either we or the planning consultant have said, you still need this, as the thing that they've not spent the money on. And then that's the thing that can delay, So I guess from the planning officer's view, they must get frustrated as well when they see some applications coming in and you think, that report's not there, that report's not there.
Yeah.
That I would say is probably driven more often than not by the client as opposed to the professional consultants who've I would consider have advised them to put those reports in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the planning officers must get quite frustrated, and I think the planning officers appreciate if there's been a pre-app process, so that enables them to and where possible, I would advise clients to use the time to do a pre-app inquiry, and specifically when they do that, to ask the planning officers for a shopping list, to set out a list of documents that they're going to require for the application, and then you're in a much stronger position to say, well, you didn't ask us for that. We've got a written response here from the council saying, hey, these documents are required, and this is just something from where's this coming from? Asking for this, so it makes the process much more transparent. But it is surprising. Sometimes I still sometimes get clients come to me who've started the process on a site already, and they've commissioned some consultant to do some reports, and you just think, what? Why are you doing that?
Yeah,
complete waste of money and time. Sometimes it still happens.
Yeah,
it's weird. I don't really know why. I think some of it is naivety. Some of it's maybe bad advice from some consultants. I don't know whether it's probably not a planning consultant that they maybe it's just the agent on the site who's selling, the agency who are selling the site or working with them that says, oh, you need this. But it does happen still. So again, that coming back to the benefits of an initial planning appraisal and a pre-app inquiry to sort of nail down what you actually need before you submit your planning application.
So the pre-app is something that a lot of clients come to us is, because it's becoming much more prevalent. It's also something local authorities charge for. Most of them, if not
most of them, not all of them do still. So, and although in Scotland, even the ones that do charge, I think it's good value. If you look at England, in England now, some of the pre-apps are as expensive as the actual planning applications, but in Scotland, you're getting good value from a pre-app, even if you do have to pay for it. It's usually less than £1,000.
Yeah. What would you say to the client then who thinks, well, if I put a pre-application in, it's probably going to take me another couple of months to get a decision that I was going to get to anyway. So why don't I just put the full plan application in?
No, I don't think that. I think that's a false economy. No, I think the reality is it'll take your planning application much longer.
Right.
Because the pre-app gives you, if you give enough information in your pre-app and you ask the right questions, then your pre-app should come back much more helpful to get an efficient application in that could be determined quicker.
Right.
I think putting an application in without that and expecting then waiting a few months and then the planning officers come back asking you for a list of documents is going to take longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. We're getting to that stage in the podcast now where I wanted to, I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, because as you're talking, I've got a million and one scenarios in my head there that I just don't have time to talk about. So maybe there'll be a planning episode 2, you never know. But I wanted to kind of try and round things up now by asking you a wee question that's been left by our previous guests. So in terms of the industry, not necessarily just planning, but in terms of the construction industry, property industry, what do you think could be the one thing you would do to boost collaboration?
I think we need to meet in person more. How we do that, I'm not sure. We're all busy, and it does save a lot of time setting up meetings online. But I think where it is possible, folks should try and make the effort to meet in person and sort of weigh up that. I just think actually, even if you did it every other meeting or one or two meetings during a project are in person, I think that would be valuable. And that over time builds relationships as well and trust and working together. And you can appreciate more what the people you're working with, what skills they've got. And because that's how, I don't know whether it's the case for you, but I imagine it's similar. That's how I do what I do. I don't advertise really. I've got a website, but it's through recommendation, through people that I've worked with, other consultants, architects, solicitors, engineers who you've worked with on previous projects who, when a problem comes up and another client of theirs has got a planning issue, they think, speak to Scott about it. And that's how it grows. That's how your business grows. So, and that's about the relationships of people you've worked with. And I think those relationships will benefit from actual in-person, working,
absolutely.
Meeting.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I thought that a recent experience relating to work, generating work and referral. First time I've had this experience just a couple of weeks ago, a new project, new client because of AI.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting, this one.
Yeah. So it's the first time this has happened. So somebody, occasionally I'll get somebody who's come across my website and gets in touch through the website who I don't know. But this was different to that. This was somebody who'd tried to, who's got a building, which listed building and want to change its use. And it was a relatively complicated, but they were using AI to write a planning statement, write a planning strategy, understand what the planning process was. And AI recommended me.
Right, okay.
AI actually told them, you should get in touch with this guy. Right. And they did. Right. And I was able to help them. So I think that might be the future as well. That might happen more and more. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think, well, we're keen to get someone on the podcast who, if you like, is an AI specialist, to talk about how AI could affect the industry in the future. But that's interesting that's just happened to you. I think AI will become a kind of tool that could assist people, but I don't think it's going to be, certainly not anytime soon, the be all and end all, the thing that's going to give, going to write a report for the planner that's specifically going to tick all the boxes. Because in fact, I've got an example of someone who it was health and safety. So they got AI to write a report for health and safety. They won the tender, and the AI bot, whatever it said, that we're going to wear cameras, these body mounted cameras on site. So of course the site manager turns up, where's your cameras? And they go, what are you talking about cameras? They never even read the submission before. So AI can be dangerous from that perspective. Yeah. Scott, we're coming to the end. I just wanted to see if you could leave us a wee quick question for the next guests.
Yeah. I think as I understand the next guests, it's 3 women in
3
property.
women, yes.
That should be really interesting.
One for us, yep.
Yeah, and I think the obvious question perhaps is, and I'm sure it's something that you will discuss with them a bit, is in the property industry, how different, whether men and women approach things differently. It's a generalisation to some extent,
right, yeah.
But what benefits, and there will be benefits to how a woman would approach a challenge or an obstacle as to how a man might do that. Coming back to the whole discussion that we had earlier about making decisions and weighing up judgment about things. And in planning, I'm finding more and more, I would say probably the majority now of planning officers that I'm dealing with who are dealing with an application I've submitted are women.
Right.
And whether that's a factor in changing how decisions are made or not, maybe. But yeah, I think that's a kind of useful discussion to have.
Well, the next podcast will be the one where we debate that or discuss that. I won't be debating anything. I'll just be facilitating the conversations. Not going to argue with 3 women, definitely not. So, not fantastic. Scott, if anyone's listening to the podcast, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, my website is mackayplanning.co.uk, or you can email me at scott@mackayplanning.co.uk.
Fantastic.
Or AI will find me.
Or AI will find you. Fantastic. Scott, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've obviously at the start of the podcast, we mentioned the challenge and the bottlenecks of planning. And I thought it was important that we get a planning consultant, particularly yourself, along so we can share some of your views on what's happening in the planning system just now. And hopefully if there's any listeners who are politically minded or politicians, they'll listen to this podcast or any of the other podcasts we've done, because there's a whole library there now of podcasts that really do explore the challenges we're facing in the industry. So thanks for your time, Scott, and we'll see you on the socials.
Thanks for having me on.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Hard Hat Talks. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. That way, you'll be sure to never miss an episode. If you've got any feedback or a topic you want us to tackle, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep your hard hat on.